Okay, the appointed time has arrived. I like to call the Public Safety Appropriations Committee to order, and I'd like to ask Representative to ask the blessing. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for the
So here, bless their families. We just ask that you'd be with us as we try to make decisions and betterment for the state of Georgia. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much. This certainly is a distinguished looking group here today. This is our second day of hearings, and yesterday we went from 1 to 5 with another group, and we got out about 4:30 and had 2 interruptions where we had to go vote one time, and we didn't get here on time. So I hope it runs as smoothly today, and I know how important it is to you. Like I said earlier, I've sat over there for 10 years asking for money, and we don't want to shortchange you on time. But also, as I said, I think today brevity could be your friend, and we're going to move right on. We're gonna take a break for lunch here in a little while. It's going to be a fast one. We've just got some box lunches coming. We hadn't had an opportunity to eat yet. So, but I'm going to skip around a little bit, and I think they're used to it. I'm going to call the Supreme Court first, and I don't want to make them mad. Well, everybody's got the tracking sheet. It's on page 6.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. When you mentioned lunch, I assumed Representative Williams' absent was indicating that he was going collecting for everybody, but we used to seeing him in this room. Mr. Chairman, in the interest of brevity, I will get right to the 2 issues of substance in our fiscal 25 report on, I think, your tracking sheet 10.1.3. That is the moving of our dues for the National Center for State Courts from the Supreme Court's budget to the Judicial Council's budget, which I will talk to you about shortly when we come up there. We're not really sure historically why it ended up in our court. It's certainly an entity that serves all of the courts in Georgia, and we think it more appropriately rests there. And then on 10.1.4, this is the funding request associated with the report that you all heard at your December 6th hearing during the special session related to what is now House Bill 947, and that would be the funding. And I do just preemptively and not trying to take your time, want to say that I heard some conversation around retirement impact. These numbers use the multiplier. That is to say that fully funds the anticipated liability related to retirement. That's not just the dollars associated with the compensation piece. And the other piece that I would say, because I'm the first of 2 other classes of court that you'll hear from today. I think the statewide business court is located elsewhere in the House's budget process. But the collective resources here, a lot of the conversation in this space has been around that it's a raise, and there's no doubt, no question that for a significant number of judges there is a raise. But there's also a significant number of judges who do not see any raise. In fact, half the dollars that are involved here are actually the state reclaiming responsibility for paying state employees dollars that are currently coming from counties, and I think it's worth sort of noting that in terms of the impact. So I would certainly yield for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Mathis.
Thank you for being here. We've talked about the retention rates and the staff attorneys. Has the salary come up? It's 2 parts. And what are your staff attorneys making, and what is their retention rates is right now?
The top rate for our staff attorneys is $132,000.
132.
I will say that we provided the committee with a response last year about our turnover, and certainly with respect to the individuals that we've lost to the private sector, we recognize that we cannot compete. I mean,
Yeah.
and we're not asking you to make us
understand.
equal to the private sector.
Yeah.
But certainly that is a issue, particularly for our long-term folks who lose upward mobility after they've been with the state for a while.
Have we been able to retain some of these with a little better, or are we still having attrition?
We know that we have at least 2 individuals who are likely to retire. So, those aren't losses related to compensation. They are losses. The refilling has been a challenge for us. Our average time to fill has moved all the way up to 4 months. That's a pretty long wait when we're living in the world where we have the 2-term rule and we have to dispose of our cases. But we continue to look for avenues for recruitment in that space. I cannot say that the moves we have recently made, it would just sort of be throwing darts to say that I can have data that supports that it's been helpful because we just don't have folks in that space.
Yeah. Can I have one follow-up?
Certainly.
Explain to me why it's so important to retain these attorneys and have experienced attorneys when we're going into cases and things.
The breadth of Georgia law that our staff and the court is asked to address is the entirety of state law. In other words, I think the members know that we don't have, like some states have, a Supreme Court of Criminal Appeals or various different systems. Everything that is the ultimate question in Georgia law comes before our court. And to have experienced individuals who have that history and have been there at the court, I'm fortunate we have staff that precedes my tenure on the court, and so they have the perspective of knowing some history, and they see a case come up and they can immediately refer back and say, this is part of the history in this. And then just having folks that deliver a high level of performance. The legislature funded, I guess now 6 years ago, what we call term clerks. And so our court has in each judge's chambers an individual who is generally someone fairly new in their career path. And I think that that's proved to be a very positive mix for our court to have folks that are coming in. They spend a year with us. It is a lower pay rate, so that's obviously a savings to the state. But if our full staff was populated with folks who are new to the profession of lawyering, I think it would be a much more difficult task to quickly and correctly produce our result.
Thank you for those answers. I appreciate what y'all do. Thank you.
And one of the things that's always gotten to me is the pyramid structure of the pay in the judicial. I saw a couple of years ago, in fact, got a phone call when we were looking at the structure and the fact that some Superior Court judges make a lot more than members of the Appeals Court and Supreme Court. In fact, I have part of Chatham County, and I know the chief judge down there who just retired graduated from high school with my wife. But when we were doing it, he called me and said, Bill, who told the AJC how much money I make? I said, you're just like me, buddy. We're not from the computer generation. In this day and time, these 25, 30-year-olds can go online and Google with the Department of Community not supervision. What is it?
Council Superior Court judges or any other?
No, it's the one that keeps track of all the salaries in the state. Yeah, and in fact, y'all were making about 170, and he was the chief judge, and he's getting a pretty significant supplement. He was making 210.
Yes, sir.
And as I understand it, this is going to work towards everybody's going to do all right by it, but it's going to fix that to some degree.
It will address that dynamic, and you are correct, Mr. Chairman, that has been a long-standing concern for many people. I will state only for myself and not for my court, because this is not a universal opinion. I don't begrudge people what they earn, and I will tell you right now, in part because some of them are here, but also because it's true, the most important judicial job in Georgia is a Superior Court judge. And so I'm not going to get in a contest. We went, 7 decades in Georgia without any appellate courts. We haven't gone one day without a superior court. And what they do and where they are in our system and what they do for our citizens, I will defend. I mean, I will defend. I don't personally want the message to be about getting people, relative and right position. I do think that we need to look at what our state is doing relative to our neighbors, relative to the nation, and the ability to attract good talent. My one anecdote on this front is, I have heard as the conversation has rolled along that it doesn't seem to anybody that there's ever a lack of people who want to be a judge when there's a vacancy. And I think that that's absolutely true. And as somebody who used to work and live in the human resources world, for entry-level labor, that's a good metric. If we're looking for somebody to do a sweep-the-floor job, well, do I have an alternative? But what I would ask for those of us that love college football is the fact that there are thousands of high school students who would love to play at the University of Georgia a reason for Kirby not to recruit 5 stars? And the answer is no. Talent matters and ability level matters, and compensation relates to those things.
And unfortunately, in Georgia state government, it's pretty much universally considered that if you're in the judiciary, you're not going to make as much money as those on the outside who are doing well.
We all
So-
accept that, Mr.
Right.
Chair. Yeah.
And that's that's pretty universal in all jobs in state government.
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, but and it used to be that everybody looked at it from the benefits perspective, that good health insurance, good retirement, that kind of thing, kind of ramped it up so that you felt like it was worthwhile. And and certainly in my case it was, but I was under a different system than state employees have today. But you gonna speak about the other?
Well, so just in the interest, perhaps, of speaking with respect to the other courts, the requests are all based on that same proposal that's in House Bill 947. Right. For our court, that line would be $654,117. The Superior Courts in their budget is going to show up for you as $19,809,000. I'm going to get this out right. $19,808,123. Easy for me to say. And then the Court of Appeals is $812,654. And as I said, the statewide business court is located elsewhere, but it would be the same. The collective cost of the proposal that the Judicial Council unanimously has asked the legislature to look at is $21,305,400. And so that's the aggregate of all of those requests and where you would find them in the budget request.
Representative Bruce?
Your Honor, I, like you, my background is human resources, 30 years. And what I have found is that every year, the employees, judges, everybody, they want an increase in pay. And I'm not begrudging that, but the reality is, when you get an increase in pay, then the prices of everything goes up because somebody's got to pay for that increase in pay. And so it really never ends. A dollar today is totally different than a dollar 10 years ago, but it's still a dollar. So the question is there anything that can be done to make the job more attractive other than money?
It's a great question, Representative, and I would love to engage you in sort of a longer conversation about money supply and and its relation to inflation, but that's beyond the scope, obviously, of any of our duties. It's certainly my duties. But the answer to your question is, I believe there is, and there are other initiatives that the Judicial Council and other entities are bringing. Judicial security is a real concern in this day and age, and making people feel safe at work, as you know from your human resources experience, is an important aspect of any employer's responsibility. And so I think there are initiatives in that space. As a practical matter, I think the chairman mentioned, we do have a generous benefits structure in Georgia, and so that is an attractive element of what we offer to our judicial employees. I think everybody would recognize that is an attractive benefit in a world in which a defined benefit plan is a scarce, becoming increasingly scarce, to have that is a real thing of value. I do think that it's important, that annually keeping up, and Chairman Gunner's on the end, I hate to call him out, but he survived in his previous career cycle, over a decade and a half with no pay adjustment. And part of what the model that we're presenting to the legislature is really designed mostly to do. This is a singular catch-up. The legislature identified on its own terms with its own study committee in 2016 that we were behind. There hasn't been a substantial change since 2016, other than inflationary pressures have reduced the real dollar value of everyone's pay, not just judges, but everyone's pay. But the model is designed to help us keep incrementally pace with the economy rather than come and look for big jumps and big adjustments. I think the presiding justice in your December 6th committee meeting, where we went through the whole proposal, noted that the real dollar value of judicial pay in Georgia, even from just 20 years ago, is diminished by about a third, because we just haven't been able to keep up. And when you look at the cost of living and inflationary pressures in the country, that's what that's what the math shows you we are doing. And that's a difficult place to live when folks are, in many cases, as the chairman said, dedicating themselves to public service. We like good judges on the bench for an extended period of time. That brings stability to the community and hopefully to the state and the legal system. Well, if you stay in a long time and you have diminishing buying power each year, that's a difficult thing to endure and experience and provide for a family. And so the idea is that we don't allow big gaps to develop over time, and that we stay current. But the answer to your question is I do think there are things that we can do. Those vary a lot. Our Superior Court judges are state employees, but they generally work in county facilities. And so the partnering of making that an attractive work environment is probably a very complicated process. But this is one way for us to say we're keeping parity with the market. And I do want to say, while I agree with you wholeheartedly that sort of chasing income is always difficult in the HR place, we want to be clear that the request as we've presented in fully funded leaves our judges in Georgia. The Court of Appeals would be the 12th among the 50 states in terms of compensation relative to their peer group. Our superior courts would be 14th, with an asterisk next to that because some would still be higher based on the existing framework we have with locality pay, but in terms of what the state was providing. And our court would be 15th among the states in the union. And we think, when we look at what you have done and shown us in other places in Georgia, when we look at neighbor states, sister states of similar population, that is consistent with what you've set out as a general policy in other places, and would simply like to be a part of that sort of general policy.
Thank you.
Chairwoman Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question. Why has the judiciary, just as a whole, been as content as they are to leave our juvenile court judges out?
Well, I would dispute that anyone has been content. I think that the practical reality is that in every county, there seems to have grown up different ways of dealing with how we do juvenile court. And as you of course know, juvenile court was initiated sort of in this pilot project posture relative to superior court, because all of that jurisdiction used to live in superior court. And then over the years, juvenile courts in higher density population areas grew, and so there are many different pathways. And while they are funded with state dollars, they are not funded usually with like sort of the direct salary measure of our other state paid judges. So we have before the General Assembly, and I think Chairman Gunner's probably going to, the original proposal from the Judicial Council included what our recommendation was a commission to help the legislature keep track of what's going on in the judicial branch. So that would also speak to not just juvenile court judges, but magistrate judges, probate court judges, municipal court judges, assistant district attorneys who, at least to my knowledge, I know of at least 3 ways that they get paid in Georgia in different scales, which is hard. You know, you can explain it if you go back in history, but it doesn't make sense to the person who's trying to get a job, or public defenders. And so that, I think, has moved in the process into a proposed legislative study committee to evaluate those things and the prospect of whether a commission like other states are doing would be wise for us. And we wholeheartly stand behind that commitment. The proposal that we developed was to try and address our direct state paid judges, our state employed judges, and to try to speak to the problem as we perceived it that had grown up around the way local supplements work, which is a little bit different than what we do in juvenile court world. It is, you know, many times there's a local supplement, but it doesn't look like it does in Superior Court. And that Superior Court gap has resulted in what you've seen in your paperwork that we've provided with you. But our Superior Court judges are either 45th in the nation or 5th in the nation, depending in no part on what the legislature does, depending only on what's happening at the county level. So the idea was to try to get past that problem so that we can move forward. And this was the genesis of the process. So I don't know if you're hearing from other folks that there's a lack of interest in the judiciary for juvenile court. That has not been relayed to me by anyone. But this was a plan that addressed the sort of pinch point need to be able to move forward with other evaluations. And I expect that, I'm hopeful that trying to make sure this is something, it's administration of justice. I got to be careful when I start talking about policy things as a judge now. I used to be able to talk about them all the time. I really think there's real room for the General Assembly to commit to juvenile court as a full standalone class of court, like, you know, really reimagine what it looks like. We can't do that. The work they do is making the Georgia for my children and grandchildren. That's the juvenile court is where future Georgia, if you go to court, that's where you are. And so I apologize, frankly, if it has come across as though this is not addressing juvenile court judges and the needs that we have in juvenile court, because I think they are real, and I believe that's a universal perception, that at least from those I've talked to in the judiciary.
Any further questions? I think our brevity's flown out the window here.
I tried, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate it, and I didn't mean it at all to denigrate Superior Court judges. All my experience in my career has been in the Superior Court, and they run the gamut from divorces to child support to capital crimes, and I see it in other places in state government too, where those on top deal with significant administrative problems, but the people that actually do the work sometimes don't get the credit.
Yes, sir. And I wouldn't have taken it that way. I think it's
I know
important to
that.
me that we say
I know that.
that's where the rubber meets the road.
I just didn't want anybody else to think that.
Appreciate it.
Particularly Chairman Gunner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate what you do. How about the Department of Community Supervision?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'll be brief and try to get you back on track here. First off is section 18.1 to 18.4. There are 4 items. The first one just is increase of funds for statewide adjustments. No different there than other state agencies. Also an increase in funds for GBA rental rates. Increased funds for the 4% COLA at $6.9 million. Also an increase in funds for a $3,000 law enforcement salary enhancement of $6.8 million. As you know, we have over 1,500 sworn law enforcement staff within the agency. We are also requesting funds for centralized reporting unit virtual agent positions. Those are 8. What we find is that when a circuit is unable to fill positions, or you have staff that are out on FMLA or military duty, somebody has to pick that work up. So what we're wanting to do, and this would be my terminology, is request these positions to serve as utility positions where they can fill in that short-term gap and not add burden to an already burdened staff, perhaps. Also, in keeping in line with our request to identify 1% in our budget was a reduction in our leased office space, and that would be $302,000. That will have some complexities associated with it, but again, we were complying with the instructions. Increased funds for community supervision aid positions. As you know, a community supervision officer's job is in the community. We have a lot of officers that spend a lot of time in court doing non-law enforcement functions. What this would help us to do is provide additional admin staff within the court setting where you don't necessarily need to have a law enforcement certification. It will also enhance promotion opportunities for those staff who are in positions that do not require a college degree. So again, at the bottom line, it's all about creating time and efficiencies for our officers to do our core work regarding our mission. And then increasing funds for additional community coordinator positions. Again, this is to help us build capacity when we make referrals to those that are under our supervision, whether it be for housing, mental health, substance abuse, whatever the case may be. Instead of our officers having to use their time and go establish and build a referral base, these individuals are embedded in the community, and that is their job, is to create that referral base for the officers to utilize and have at their disposal. The capital request is a request to replace 111 vehicles statewide. As you know, we have right now 164 vehicles eligible for replacement according to DOS Fleet Management. We have moved since the inception of the agency. We have closed approximately 80 offices. Again, community supervision is done in the field. It's not a brick and mortar fortress type system. And these vehicles serve as the officer's office. It is imperative that, hey, they have safe equipment to utilize when they're out in some of these areas, and also are efficient with those utilizations. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that will conclude my request. There is a handout. Many of you are well versed with DCS. Some of you may not be as versed. There's a one-page handout that I really think does a good job of giving the overall structure of our responsibility and what it is. And if there's any other questions regarding that, or if you'd like to take us up on the offer of a ride-along, we stand ready to do that. So that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Chairman?
Thank you, Chairman. I have taken y'all up on a ride along, and it
Thank you,
was
sir.
very informative. Couple of questions. I know the argument about closing down some of the offices, but what about when there is a need for, say, for drug testing? How are we handling that? And I've got something else.
Yes, sir. A lot of times the drug testing is done in the location that they are being supervised in the home. That's not ideal, but we do partner with treatment facilities. We partner with other law enforcement entities to make arrangements. And I think that's one of the additional benefits of that is allows for further collaboration at the local level. But we have not had an issue with that. We have changed some of our drug testing where we can do hair analysis, swab analysis, in addition to the urinalysis. But generally, it has not proven to be a difficult situation.
Okay, and this has been going on for years. Is Georgia still the highest as far as those under supervision? And any thoughts on that?
I got a lot of thoughts on that, but yes, we are, and that's unfortunate. We not only have the highest number of felony offenders under supervision in the nation, we also have, on average, the longest sentence lengths in the nation. So obviously, there's a stacking effect that comes in. If you look at 35 to 40,000 startups per year, you're definitely not getting 30 to 40,000 coming off. The legislature has done a wonderful job in recognizing that and allowing folks to transition off of community supervision where they don't stay part of those numbers, but it's still not enough. We do have research that shows that if someone is going to reoffend, it is going to be within the first 12 months. And that's why it's critical that we put all that we can on the front end for the dosage part of it. It's like antibiotics, for instance. If you've got to take a lot up front for some of them to get back to the right dosage. So that's really the formula here.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is my understanding you ride 2 officers to the car now since you moved out of the office?
We do, yes, sir. And we have had, and thank you for that, Colonel Chairman. We have had folks that have asked us, do you need 1 car per officer? While I would love that, I can't stand here and tell you that's a good utilization of resources. I believe those cars, if you had 1 officer, 1 vehicle, they would be underutilized, and right now we have 1 vehicle assigned to 2 officers. That doesn't mean they both ride in it all the time, but that 1 vehicle is available to those 2 officers.
But you've got enough offices around now that when they need to do administrative work outside what they can do on the computer, that they have the ability to, in relative proximity, to get in and do that.
That is correct, and our cars are equipped with cradle points where they always have internet access in those vehicles. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? I'd just like to compliment you on your financial person there. We spent a lot of time training her.
We think we're going to, well, as my dad would say, you done good. We appreciate our CFO, Ms. Duke, and what she does for us, and we have no intention of letting her go. Just to let everyone know here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Department of Juvenile Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll just jump right in. We'll start out with 31.1.1, which is the 4% cost of living increase in the amount of $2,101,000.
Let me say this. All these universal items that are on here that affect every agency, we don't need to talk about those.
All right, fair enough. Well, we'll jump right down to 31.1.6. Which is to increase funds to adjust the state-based salary schedule to increase salaries for certified teachers and certified employees in the amount of $2,500. The total cost is $20,974, and we bring that up because what makes us a little different is we're the 181st school district. So that is the reason why we have the salaries for certified teachers in our budget as well. The next item is 31.1.7, which is a reduction that we're taking in our contract costs and community, just based on the spending that we've seen historically. We've been asked to make a 1% reduction, and we think that we could handle making a 1.5 million one here. The next item is 31.2.6. Which is to provide funds for ongoing costs of new electronic auditing tool $55,000. And we have an Office of Continuous Improvement, and their responsibility is to make sure that they go in and do internal audits for us. What we're wanting to do is an electronic tool, because this will allow us to have more transparency. Also will allow us to be able to do trend analysis so that we know what's working, what's not working, and we can use data to make internal decisions. The next item we have is 31.2.7, which is once again a reduction in contract costs. We've done work, like for example, we contracted with an outside company to do the retention and recruitment study. Now that that work has been done, we no longer will have to utilize the fund, so we think we could sustain this reduction. The next item is 31.3.7, which is to provide ongoing costs associated with grievance system. We were asked to move the $75,000 versus the ongoing cost into the 2025. This is really important to us because we're to ensure that we afford all of our youth with the basic right of being able to file a grievance. And so having an electronic system will just allow us to do that more effective and efficiently. The next item is 31.3.8. Which is the share of health insurance benefits for the University System of Georgia Board of Regents for contracted employees in the amount of $50,689. We currently contract with Augusta University to provide our medical services, so this is the reason why this item appears in our budget. 31.3.9, this is for mobile welding labs at 3 of our long-term facilities, Macon, Eastman, and Augusta, in the amount of $600,000. 31.3.10, the funding of body cameras in our long-term facilities in the amount of $148,282. So we have what's called CCTV in all of our facilities, and this is what we like to say, this is the visual. But what the body cameras, what that will do is allow us the opportunity when there's an incident that happens in a facility, the frontline staff then will have cameras that they could use to also not only capture the incident, but also the audio of the incident. The next item is 31.3.11, capital maintenance and repairs in the amount of $4,804,408. We have a lot of aging facilities, and because of that, a lot of things come up. Right now, we've been replacing grease traps. We have a lot of roof repairs and other plumbing issues that we have to deal with. So this will just help us to keep those facilities in good repair. The next item is 31.3.12, is to adjust the state-based salary schedule once again, which I spoke about earlier. And in our YDCs, the cost is $243,296 for our teachers. In addition to that, we have 31.3.13, which is to provide funds for mandatory teacher step increases. This is something that is statutorily required, is based on the educator's certification as well as the credible years of service. And this year, that total is $37,440. For 31.3.14, we're taking a reduction of $392,100. We changed out our uniforms for our staff. We went away from that adult correctional look to something that's more user-friendly in a juvenile setting. We have the BTUs, which is really the khakis and the polo shirts. So that is how we're able to take that reduction. The next item is 31.4.7. Now we're in our short-term facilities, our RYDCs for the body cameras there. The cost is $427,346. 31.4.8, once again, is the grievance system, and the cost for a startup to do one is $75,000. 31.4.9 is to increase the health insurance for the AU employees based on the medical contract, and that cost is $74,100, excuse me. The next item is 31.4.10 is to provide funds for capital maintenance and repairs. The issues are pretty much the same. The difference is on the ROIs, we have 19 of those. So the request for maintenance and repairs is $9,808,818. 31.4.11, once again, is to increase the salaries for our teachers and certified staff. The cost in the ROIs is $331,385. The mandatory teacher step increase for the ROIs is $79,560. And then the reduction there, once again, is because of the uniforms. But I also wanted to just mention, Mr. Chairman, if I may, that we've also been asked to do an analysis to look at what the cost would be. Normally, we pay our officers, our correctional officers, the same as the adult system, and we've kind of fallen behind a little bit. Our starting salary is $37,730. And their starting salary is $40,040, which there's a difference of $2,310. So if we were able to catch up and to start out with the same amount that they are offering, that would cost us $2,971,433. Also with our peace officers, because we do have law enforcement, with the increase, we would need to be able to provide for all of those new officers coming in. We would need to increase the benchmark for them as well, and that cost would be $2,371,097. I will move over to our capital requests. We have for both the Macon YDC and the Macon YDC and the Milledgeville YDC, we've already received funding to do the design fees. In the process, the cost of doing designs went up, so we're making a request for an additional $1.8 million for Macon YDC for design fees, and additional $1.8 million for Milledgeville YDC for the design fees. In addition to that, we have a request in the amount of $52 million for Milledgeville YDC for it to become a 48-bed YDC. Right now, it's the smallest YDC that we have, and we just don't have the normal programming space. We don't have a cafeteria or any other multi-purpose area space. We don't have adequate education space in that facility, and this would just bring it up to the same standard as we operate our other long-term facilities. We also have a request for major repair and renovations in the amount of $2,300,000, which just helps us to maintain the facilities. And then the last request, several years ago, we closed down our Gwinnett RYDC because there was a failure with the plumbing. It collapsed and we closed it, and we didn't have enough land on that site to rebuild a facility based on the standards in which we build today. So this is a request of $3,800,000. The county has said that they will provide the land, but we would need to do the assessments, and we would also need to do the design of that facility. And so that's what's incorporated into the $3.8 million. And with that, I will pause for any questions.
Do you have any questions? One of the things I wanted to ask, and I have somewhat, a little bit of knowledge of this, is how much does it cost you to house a juvenile per day? Do you?
For the RY is $455.39, and in the YDCs is $1,066.29.
Which is significantly more than it is in the adult system,
Yes,
because of all the things that you're required to, education and medical care and,
yes.
right,
Yes.
okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Who's doing the judicial council? That's what I thought. I probably should have got you to go.
I wasn't even expecting to be here yet today.
Okay, how about the Court of Appeals?
Good morning. My name is Amanda Mercier. I'm here on behalf of the Georgia Court of Appeals. In the interest of brevity, I will say that if there are any questions with regard to our numbers, with regard to the Judicial Compensation Committee recommendations, I think Justice Bethel already pointed out our portion of that would be $812,654. If there's questions specifically as that pertains to the Georgia Court of Appeals, I'm certainly happy to answer those. The remaining items that we have are basically ongoing operational costs. I will draw your attention to 5.1.2, which is an increase in annual cyber insurance premiums for a total of $6,500. Obviously, with the world the way it is today and lots of entities suffering attacks, we have to make sure that our cyber insurance is up to speed, and as I understand it, it can kind of go up and down based on what we are doing, although we've been lucky because we've kind of exceeded some of the requirements, so our premiums, we've been able to keep those down.
Didn't you negotiate them away last year?
I'm sorry?
Didn't you negotiate the cost away last year? I
we-
think one of the agencies, one of the judicial agencies did not
Yes,
pay anything.
I think so. We did in fact give some money back,
Right.
actually. That is correct. All right, so for 5.1.3, we have a server room and data closet that has a 5-year battery replacement. I am told as of today, those batteries are, at about 4 years, they need to start to be replaced. Ours, we're in year 5, and that's part of our backup system. So that is for $23,281. That's just to make sure that our batteries do not go down, and we are at the end of that cycle, and it is infrastructure critical. 5.1.4 would be an annual increase in costs for online legal research and tools. The only thing probably more important than this are the people who actually use these tools in our court. That would include Westlaw and LexisNexis. That's the search engines that we use, or the software that we use to be able to do the research that we do to complete the opinions. So literally next to our human beings in our building, that is probably one of the most important asks that we make. 5.15 is a cost of a redundant internet circuit. Redundant's probably not a good word, it's more of a backup. As Justice Bethel mentioned, we are constitutionally bound to complete our cases within a 2-term rule, and should we have some sort of catastrophic internet failure, that could cause us to default constitutionally if we can't get it back up and running. This is truly just a backup way to make sure that if we have anything go down, we are not sidelined and not able to complete the job that we are constitutionally mandated to complete. 5.1.6, that's the required RT maintenance annual cost increases. Those total $14,956. That's truly the licensing and the software that we use to run other things. That does not include LexisNexis and Westlaw, because that's a usage-based application. These are the other licensing and support we need for our software to run the court. And then 5.1.7, the annual cost of moving disaster recovery and backup to a cloud-based offsite vendor is $28,564. That is a best practice to try to locate our things in an offsite vendor so that we can have multiple locations where we store our information. And again, that is to protect the information that we produce and the product that we produce at the Georgia Court of Appeals. It's just an extra way to maintain security at our court. I am certainly open to any questions, obviously, if anyone has any.
Any questions? I'm gonna ask an easy one, and I probably already know the answer because everybody in here is similarly situated, is, are you losing staff attorneys because of pay to outside interest or other places in state government?
We are indeed. We have lost several just in the last couple of months, and I asked Judge Doyle to be with us today. She's our budget chair. She's also experienced this personally in her office. We actually have quite a bit of information on that. If you would like to hear it, we're happy to provide that to you. If in the interest of brevity, if you don't, that's okay. We just wanted to make sure we had that available for you if you had questions.
I'd love to hear it if you could come by my office one day.
Yeah, and we did provide some of this to the
Okay.
House, so you should have it. But we're about a 10% vacancy rate. We've had a bunch of people leave for the private sector and other state jobs where they're making a lot more money.
Well,
Getting them hired is tough. So yeah, I'm happy to come over. if you
it's a
want.
continuing problem in the judiciary. Everybody, staff attorneys, Department of Law, district attorneys, indigent defense, they all losing people, good people.
That's true, and we can't replace that, sir.
Right.
That institutional knowledge is impossible to replace.
But call us over, we'll come.
Okay, no questions. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Want to give the Judicial Council a try again?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again. I am joined here by Mr. Andrew Zoll, who his main job is to keep me from saying anything incorrect, but also it's to celebrate his birthday today, so we're proud of him showing up.
You gonna sing for us?
I think we're all better off if I don't, Mr. Chairman. But thank you. And I have other members of the Judicial Council, Administrative Office of the Court staff are with us if we have questions that we need to address. I'm in section 6, and I will try to follow your track sheet line numbers as best as I can. And so I will start with 6.1.1. This is a request from the Council of Accountability Court judges, and this is really a completion of an initiative that you've already begun. This is 1 quarter of a year of the position for the coordinator for the medication-assisted treatment program. This was a program that many of you will recall was originally federally funded. That funding ran out. It's essential to keep these records and make sure that we're being responsible in this space. And so this is just, last year we got 3/4 of the year because that's when the grant ran out, and this is the final 1 quarter. No items in 6.2 or 6.3. The bulk of our activity is in section 6.4, and that's the Judicial Council's budget proper. And so the total in 6.4 is $795,116, and I'll walk through what those requests are. What you will see on 6.4.1 is request for a project coordinator position. The increasing demands of different committees and responsibilities reporting both state and federal capacity places more demands on us from an administrative standpoint. The choice here that we made was to find an individual who can coordinate projects, and the salary for this position we would project at $50,000 a year to free up individuals who are doing other tasks and coordinating projects to sort of a higher use of their time, rather than look for another analyst position and look to let the people who are doing those jobs have more time to do that and take away some of the project and meeting coordination type tasks. And so that's what the genesis of that position is and what the request is. On 6.4.2, am I right? Yeah, MLP. That is a request. You will remember that last year I was before you asking for $619,000 for something that's called medical legal partnerships. The legislature funded $200,000 of that. This is still the balance of the request. I was asked actually in Senate committee, and I will say to this committee, the number there is really just a product of what we felt like we could responsibly administer and show a return on investment for. It's not to say that that's the right number. In terms of it might be that at some point in time that's bigger, but we didn't want to ask for something that we didn't feel like we could administer and deliver results. That process with the $200,000 you have given us has been initiated really in full with respect to a project in Atlanta that's associated with Grady. Atlanta Legal Aid manages that and is still in process of coming online in a project in Savannah where Georgia Legal Services is working that and bringing it up. I have some anecdotal evidence of what we do. The committee's heard that sort of testimony before.
That's what I wanted to hear, because I did a poor job, I think, in committee of explaining that. The one that I remember is the organ transplant. And
Mr. Chairman, I always say that's sort of the highest example of where the state and all individuals involved get a return. So yes, an individual where, for example, someone has a need of an organ transplant, they are hospitalized, and their home environment is inadequate for them to get. So transplant protocols require you to have a healthy home environment to recuperate in. So you can't get the transplant, and so you stay in the hospital indefinitely. And so sometimes it's breaking a lease. Sometimes, like for a minor child, it might be a temporary custody agreement with a relative who has a safe and healthy home environment. But these run the gamut. And I'll give you just one example. I've sort of got a list of a few. At the Grady Medical Legal Partnership recently, 2 individuals who were there with very serious health situation, and also were a family that experiences extraordinary levels, it looks like, of domestic violence, used the Medical Legal Partnership to get their advanced planning directive, so wills, but also other advanced planning. And part of that program was to protect a child from what the default in the law would have been in terms of guardianship upon the passing of these 2 individuals. And so we can all imagine what the savings might be. So we can demonstrate, direct fiscal savings to both the healthcare industry and the state with some of the programming, but also the avoidance cost of having people have these resources is pretty significant in some of the cases. I won't run through sort of a list of examples, but the idea is that an individual embedded in the hospital is able to help individuals secure benefits, address challenges that they're having within the community that interfere with their ability to get the appropriate level of medical care. And so, again, the state oftentimes sees a return on that investment, and so does the healthcare community. And then, obviously, it's a good thing. You never want to omit the part that people are getting benefit directly for themselves, so they get the appropriate health care, and the long-term benefit to the community is there. So that's the request, is the still sort of the original request, but y'all have funded the $200,000. And we have ongoing conversations in Augusta, Brunswick, and I believe Columbus, and of course there's certainly need in the metro Atlanta area that we've already started with the Grady project, but those would be the communities that would probably be most likely to be able to be reached next in the scope of the program. The next request is 6.4.3 on your tracking sheet. This is a request from the Council of Municipal Court Judges. You have heard me talk about this when we talked about the amended budget. I won't repeat it. This is unless you have questions, and I think we have municipal court representatives here, but you've heard me talk about it, and I know you're trying to move along. On 6.4.4, this is similar. I don't think that you've heard me talk about the request because I don't think it was in the amended on the Council of Magistrate Court Judges. But again, this is a request for 10,000. Turned the page in the wrong direction. Yes, $10,723. And again, this is similar to the request from municipal court in terms of just straight operational support for the things that they are required to do by law, and making sure that they have the resources to do that. The last in section 6 is the item I mentioned before when I was up here for the Supreme Court, and that is 6.4.5. And this is just a transfer, a left pocket, right pocket for the dues for the National Center for State Courts, and just moving it into the Judicial Council level. You have on your agenda the Judicial Qualifications Commission. They are always in our part of the budget, and we always allow them to present that on our behalf. And so the last piece that I want to address to you is 6.6.1, and that is the Resource Center. Most of this committee is familiar with the Resource Center, I expect, but not always is, and that name doesn't help you a lot. These are the individuals who provide legal services for individuals who are on under a sentence of death, or are facing a sentence of death in our state. It this position, this would be a singular additional position. The budget for the Resource Center also includes federal dollars, but the federal dollar mix is driven by the caseload in the federal court system. That number has gone down, and so they have need for the resources. And there was a position at one time that was funded by a grant from the state bar as part of evaluating the appropriate funding sources or recipients from the state bar. That was phased out, and so this would replace, I think, funding related to that position. Don't
Don't we have three over there already? This would be a fourth attorney?
That is, I believe that is correct. Yes, sir, it is. That's right.
How many, you recollect how many people we have on death row now?
We have, they are representing 41 defendants today. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my list of items, and certainly if you have questions, I'll be happy to do my best.
I don't see any questions. I appreciate all the time you spent. I wish I'd have captured you the first time, got it all over with.
Mr. Chairman, I'm proud to go when you call me. Yeah. Thank you.
I may have to remember that. Does somebody here from Judicial Qualifications? Okay, and I hate to do this to you, but we're gonna break here for just a few minutes, and, for all the members of the committee, we have lunch in, is it 410? In room 410, but it's just a box lunch. We shouldn't be long. We'll be right back. So. Okay, we're ready to get back to it. Appreciate everybody bearing with us. And we'd like to call first the JQC. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry, I am out of breath. We just made the walk over here, but Chairman, I appreciate you having us here this afternoon, and the members of the subcommittee, I appreciate you having us here. My name's Courtney Veal. I presented in front of you all last year. I was the deputy director at the time. Since that time, I've become the director of the JQC. Some days I question my judgment there, but joking aside, as I have grown into my role at this commission, one of the things that I have realized is the importance of us pouring into and doing the work in both of the spaces that we should be doing the work. And so the first is the educational assistance piece of what this commission is designed to do. I tell people often that it's kind of like the State Bar of Georgia is for lawyers. They have an entire department dedicated to providing ethical guidance to our attorneys in the state, and then they have another department that deals with the investigations and the prosecutions, if there are any. The JQC does not have that kind of division. We're actually only one of 10 states that does not have a separate commission to handle the ethical guidance and the advisory opinions and the trainings. So we do all of that. But I recognize very quickly that that piece of what we do is just as important, if not more so, than the investigative prosecutorial piece. Because if we expect our judges to be following our rules, I think that we have an obligation to be out there explaining to them our rules and what our expectations are, and what kind of guidance has been given both to us and to them by the Supreme Court of the state. And so that has become a focus of what we do at the JQC. At the same time, we are investigating and prosecuting more complaints of judicial misconduct than we ever have before. Just to give you an idea of the way in which the volume of business for the JQC has increased, in 2020, we had 535 complaints submitted for our consideration. In 2021, that went to 542. In 2022, it was 1,103. And so we essentially saw a double between 21 and 22. And then we ended last year, 2023, at 1,348 complaints that were submitted to us. I recall that last year during one of my presentations, there were some questions kind of in alarm at the number of complaints, that drastic increase. And what I explained at that time, and I want to make sure everybody understands, it is not the case that judicial misconduct has just increased overnight. I think there are a lot of factors at play. One of those being this new version of the commission that was created in 2017 provided some real structure as far as how we're handling our complaints and our investigations, and we have been very proactive in filing formal charges and pursuing prosecutions in the last couple of years. I know previously there were years that would go by, 3-4 years, where the JQC would have one hearing, and the hearings and the formal charges are what are public. And so as we have continued to file those charges and proceed with the prosecutions of the most serious cases of judicial misconduct, the public is becoming very much aware that the agency exists and that we are taking steps to pursue these prosecutions. And so I think that's a very big factor. I don't think that I'm going to be before you next year or the following year to tell you that our numbers have declined as far as the number of complaints that we're seeing. This is a trend that is happening across the country. I attended a conference in the fall with other commissions like ours, and they were seeing the same kind of increases in their numbers of complaints. So with that background, the impact to the staff that we do have, which is currently 5 full-time staff at the JQC, but the impact has been a significant tax on the support staff that we have. I have one, she calls herself, the title is an executive administrator, but she truly performs the function of assistant, secretary, office manager. She wears a whole lot of hats. She also mans our phone and does the bulk of the intake for us. And so in wearing all those hats, this increase in our complaints has truly taken a toll. Just doing the intake piece could be a full-time job, because with intake comes, and to be clear, some of the complaints we get are sent to us from prisons and their jail mail, and they're things that we can easily review and screen out as being not a violation of the code or not within our jurisdiction. But we are also seeing an increase in the number of complaints that are submitted to us from attorneys and judges. And oftentimes those complaints are complex. They're accompanied by sometimes hundreds and thousands of pages of documents that have to be reviewed. And along with the increase in complaints, obviously we have that many people, 1,348 last year, that filed complaints that are reaching out to our office to inquire about the status of those complaints. What are you doing, or why are you not doing anything? How dare you dismiss this? And so we are dealing with a large volume of both calling, inquiries, meetings, and people showing up at our door uninvited. And so that is the tax that has taken place on my support staff, along with the increased litigation of the commission, which again, just has not existed in the past. With the JQC, we are having to do a good amount of pre-hearing, pre-trial litigation in the form of motions practice. So we're having to respond to a lot of litigation, or to a lot of motions, and then once we get into litigation, it is not a scenario where I can just show up and call 2 witnesses and then I'm finished. We recently had a hearing. I actually did closing arguments yesterday afternoon in that hearing, where we called multiple witnesses over the course of nearly a week. That's how long it took for us to put our case up. And so what I had to do was pull my executive administrator to help me balance and juggle, witness coordination and being in the courtroom to assist me there. And so what that meant was pulling her from everything else that she does, to include manning the main line of the JQC. I had to pull her from there to assist me with the trial. And so I hope that gives you all a little bit of an idea about what we're experiencing at the commission, and I certainly appreciate the support of this subcommittee. I know I stood before you last year and asked for a fund increase, and so on your tracking sheet for purposes of today, I'm in section 6. Line 6.5.1, we have made a request for an increase in funds for 1 legal assistant position, with the starting salary at $70,000 and plus fringe benefits, which would be $47,330. That's how we get to the total request of $117,330. And I had Mr. Zoll help me with the calculations for the fringe benefits. So if there are any questions about that, I'm horrible at math. I know he would be very glad to answer them. And so that is my request for today. It is a request for a permanent position, so not a one-time request, but something that would carry into the future.
So what's the breakdown now? You've got 5 employees and one of them's an administrative assistant. Are the other 4 all attorneys?
No, I have 2 other attorneys and I have an investigator.
Okay. What would you say is the ratio of valid complaints versus the frivolous ones?
So on an annual basis, we screen out around 85% of the complaints that we are seeing come in. Last year, we had 79 either preliminary or full investigations, and everything else was screened out prior to going into a full investigative status.
That was my assumption. A lot of them probably depend on whether you win or lose your case.
Absolutely. We do see, and I think another contributing factor to the increase in the number of complaints is obviously judges working very hard to address the backlogs post-COVID and bringing people into court. And so we see a lot of complaints flow to us after people have had their day in court and not gotten a favorable ruling, which is, in our world, that is an easy decision because we're not designed to second guess judges'
Right.
decision making.
Any questions? Well, I personally appreciate what you do. I've been involved in a couple of your investigations years past, and
I'm so sorry.
well, I wasn't a judge. I was it's always easy when you're not the person that the inquiry is made against. So, just for reference about judges that I had done business with, and
Sure. Well, we can't do what we need to do without the cooperation, oftentimes reluctant with many of our witnesses, which we understand, but we can't do what we need to do unless we have that cooperation. So we appreciate it.
well, we have to have confidence in our judges if we're, if the people are going to have believe that they're getting justice, and it's a small percentage that are out there, just like it is in any field of endeavor. But I appreciate what you do, and I know it's not an easy job.
Yes, sir.
So,
Thank
well,
you.
thank you. Superior Courts.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon.
Members of the Appropriations Public Safety Committee. I am Ann Harris. I'm one of the Superior Court judges in Cobb. I bring greetings not only on behalf of my colleagues in Cobb, but on behalf of all 225 Superior Court judges. I have to say it's a little unnerving following the chair of the JQC. But thank you for this opportunity to present our budget requests to you. We're in section 9 of your tracking sheets, and I'll move through them kind of quickly, but of course take whatever questions you all have. The first item at 9.3.1 is to decrease the funds that reflects an adjustment to the employer contribution rate for the judicial retirement system. That's just based on changes in the actuarial valuations, and so that represents actually a decrease in our budget request of $148,943. The next three items kind of go together, 9.3.2, 3, and 4. Those were new judgeships that were passed and approved in the 2023 session for Doherty, Coweta, and Atlantic, and it's just to get the rest of the funding for a full year of those judgeships. 9.3.5, of course, is the salary restructuring plan that has been proposed and is the subject of HB 947 that Justice Bethel covered at some length, and I'll be glad to answer any additional questions if you have them. I endorse his comments, and we Superior Court judges appreciate him taking the lead on that. The next 9.3.6, 7, and 8, those kind of go together as well. That's to provide the funding for judgeships that have just been approved this legislative session in Tifton and Houston and Douglas. And those start in, those start in July, so that's to get the full year's funding for those. And then the last three items are to back out of the budget the setup funds for judgeships that came on board in January of last year in South Georgia, Blue Ridge, and the Mountain Circuit, so that's a decrease as well. And I'm sure y'all know, but just to remind you, these are based on the judicial workload assessment calculations. I mean, it's a very complicated series of numbers to try to make sure that we're asking for judgeships only where they're needed. And in fact, we don't even ask for all of the ones that statistically indicate they need a new judgeship. I think for the last several years, we've just taken the top 3. So the total proposed budget that we're asking for, of course, is a much larger number than it normally is. It's $21,521,000, but of that, 19.8 represents the salary restructuring plan. So I'll be happy to entertain if y'all have any questions about any of these.
And I'm gonna ask one, but I don't know that you know the answer. You know, as we have observed the last couple of years, it typically is 3 a year.
Yes, sir.
And I wonder why it's 3 rather than based on activity, actual. Is that just historically what's been done, or?
That is historically what's been done. I know, for example, this year, there were, I believe, either 8 or 9 that actually qualified, but we took the top 3 because they were the ones that most severely had the need, and that's what we've done in years past. I'll be honest, I don't know. It may just have been sort of trying to take a little bit of a cautious approach and not ask for a whole bunch. And at one time, Charles, do you have any different insight on that? I'm sorry, I have Mr. Miller with me with. Right. It's just every year we have, I think every year we've had between 6 and 10 that qualify, but that's a very large number to come to you and ask for, and we appreciate that.
Well, it looks to me like.
Not as large as 19.8 million, I understand that,
Yeah,
sir.
well, it looks to me like administrative justice, you ought to have a sufficient number of judges to handle the caseload, so we don't get all backed up like we do sometimes. And I know Cobb County is just
It's busy, sir.
constant.
It is busy, but we appreciate the help that y'all give us each year, sir.
Because I'm from Chatham County, and
Y'all
you
have
know,
the same.
it's just constant down there, the growth and the inner city problems. It just, you know.
Well, the volume is substantial, the complexity of matters are substantial, so we appreciate y'all funding these, even though it's only 3, we appreciate y'all funding these judgeships every year because they do make a big difference in the circuits that are getting them.
Chairwoman Ballinger?
Yes, ma'am.
I know at one point there was, whenever y'all are doing the judicial workload, there was a question as to whether or not whenever the judicial districts go down in workload, and y'all basically don't have a metric really for capturing that, or, you know, the judges never contract. You know, if you have 4 judges and the workload may go down to only justify 3 judges, you still are going to have 4 judges. Has any progress been made on that as far as whenever the workload contracts? Has there been any headway on that? I know that's been something that's been ongoing for many, many years here on Appropriations, and I just wondered if there was any movement.
Well, we do look at that every year. I know, for example, in some circuits where there's only 2 judges, there's a real danger of going down to 1 judge, because then a judge needs to take vacation or a judge gets ill, and when you only have 1 judge, that creates some real difficulties in delivering justice. I know also, and I don't know if this is a direct result of population shifts and caseload shifts, but I know right now there is talk of the Mountain Circuit. There's a county that I believe is moving from one circuit to another, and that's a way of dealing with the population shift among those counties, because one county has more business and the other one has less. And so there's the county that needed the additional resources, and so you're addressing it. You don't necessarily need to get rid of the judgeship, you just need to shift it a little bit. So things like circuit boundary studies and things like that have been done to see if there's a way to reallocate, if you will, because typically what you'll find is a lot of times there'll be counties that maybe don't have the needs they used to, but then the neighboring county, their need is in the opposite direction. It's not a great answer, and I can try to get you some more specific information, but we're not ignoring that.
If I'm understanding the hand signals correctly, I think Justice Bethel wants to weigh in.
Oh, please, okay.
The JWAC lives at the Judicial Council, and so the Judicial Council has actually adopted a policy with respect to this a couple of years ago. And the judge is exactly right. The foundational piece of the policy starts with that we would not recommend to the legislature ever reducing a circuit to less than 2 judges, because then you don't have anybody for conflict purposes. The other dynamic that's interesting to watch is that most of we talk about a circuit being underjudged or overjudged. Underjudged means, of course, you need another person. Overjudged means that you have less workload than you have judges. The first step in that process is to, if you were to take out a judge, would the remainder district circuit be then, underjudged? And the reality is most of our circuits that are close to the line of where you would say that they are underjudged are also the lowest number of judges in that circuit. So the math of taking someone out immediately would lead them into the category of saying, well, the judges that remain have a workload that far exceeds
They're under,
say is a single judge rate. But we did create a policy for that. I will make sure that the Judicial Council gets you a copy of that policy, and I'll send the chairman or whichever. There is a policy around that. The reality is the growth in caseload greater than population has not triggered that at this point, but we certainly track it as a metric.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. I think you did a great job.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you for having us this afternoon.
Council of Juvenile Court Judges.
Good afternoon, Chairman, committee members.
afternoon.
Thank you for having us today. I'm Kirsten Wallace. I'm the Budget Director with the Council of Juvenile Court Judges, and this is our Executive Director, Eric John. And Mr. Chairman, if I may go ahead and jump into our budget request, I apologize. We are in Section 7. We're on page 3 of 25. Our first request is under the grants to counties. It's 7.2.1. We're asking for an increase of funds pursuant to Code Section 151152 for the Atlanta Judicial Circuit. 7.2.2, we've asked for an increase of funds for grants to counties for the Coweta Judicial Circuit, pursuant to the 151152. Both those funding requests are for a full year, $25,000. Our last request, 7.2.3, is provide funding for the juvenile court judge's salary supplement pursuant to the general appropriations from fiscal year 2023. This is actually a restoration of funding that was reduced in the 2023 legislative session. And that amount is $218,000. And with that, Chairman, I welcome any questions.
Do you have any questions? Hearing none, I appreciate you coming.
Okay, thank you.
Department of Law.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for having us. We appreciate this opportunity to address our FY25 budget using the track sheet under Section 33, Department of Law. 33.1.1 through 33.1.5 are all statewide changes. And 33.1.6 is the recommended funding for the second phase of our merit-based retention initiative for attorney positions in the amount of $1,594,143. as we mentioned last year. So grateful for year one. This funding really is critical to addressing recruitment and retention needs in the department, and we would ask the committee's continued support in this area. And Mr. Chairman, I mentioned a lot about organized retail crime and our gang unit expansion when we met with the joint committee. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that you may have. But I don't want to go. I don't want to kind of plow that field again if not needed. But 3317 is recommended funding for 11 positions, which would comprise an organized retail crime and cyber protection, prosecution unit, in the amount of $1,417,466. Again, we ask for favorable consideration of this important public safety initiative. And then 33.1.8, you'll see a recommended increase in funds to expand the gang prosecution unit to Columbus, Macon, and Savannah, totaling $807,312. And I would just note our team is in Columbus now with in trial in Columbus on the second phase of an issue dealing with gangs there in the Columbus area. 33.1.9 reflects a transfer of funds and positions from EPD to the law department to align with our current operations in the amount of $172,290. And 33.1.10 is a reduction of funds to reflect efficiencies found within our IT department, totaling $404,783. And then for our Medicaid fraud control unit, 33.2.1 through 33.2.4 statewide changes. 33.2.5 is recommended funding for the second phase of our merit-based retention initiative for Medicaid fraud attorneys in the amount of $13,954. And with that, Mr. Chairman and members, I would respectfully ask for your favorable consideration and happy to answer any questions that y'all may have.
Well, I'd just like to say that I think everybody in the state's impressed with the number of, particularly the gang arrest, the RICO charges, and the numbers are just astounding to me. And
Thank you.
I think it contributes a lot to making our state a lot safer, and
Thank you,
we
sir.
appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
What's the starting salary now, and what is it after the 3-year increase?
So what we've got, I think we're still at 65 or 7. 67 is our starting salary. But Chairman, what we have seen is after several years of increases in turnover rate, we actually have bent the curve a little bit, and we project that we'll drop from about 19% last fiscal year to 16% this fiscal year. So we're going in the right direction, and that's just year one. So we think if with your continued commitment to this after the next 2 years, we do think it's going to make a difference.
Do you have
It's
any
making a difference, but we think it'll make a bigger
Do you have
difference.
any vacancies?
Vacancies, team? Vacancies at 8% right now. And of course, we can get you any other information y'all need to.
I was just soliciting general information about
Yep.
how you stand with workload and pay. I mean, that's always a priority for everybody that comes here, not just the
Yeah.
judiciary, but state agencies too. And
Well, we appreciate your assistance on this. And again, we do think we are seeing a bending of the curve.
well, we want good people there and people that know what they're doing. And you know, I don't know that just because you did well in law school that you're going to be a seasoned attorney right off the bat. You have to have years of experience to deal with cases like RICO and 52 defendants.
60. We have 61.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
some additional ones maybe coming online as well.
Well,
And I want to say too, Chairman, thank you, because there are just some great lawyers in the Department of Law, and I really have appreciated what they do. And we've often been kind of a civil practice, and now with the legislature's support, being able to work with the DAs and law enforcement around the state, we have had I think a much more effective and successful criminal practice as well.
Well, it's a special niche. DAs, your office,
That's right.
prosecutors in general. I mean, and a lot of people like to do that, and we certainly need them. We appreciate them. And,
We've had
we
excellent leadership.
they have what?
We've had excellent leadership in our prosecution team.
Is
front
that
office.
is that at a lower level or?
Yes, below the top. I'll tell you that. These two, right below the Attorney General, starts picking up dramatically.
Any questions? You've You've apparently done very well. Nobody questioned you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Prosecuting Attorneys Council.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First of all, I just want to thank y'all for moving up the schedule, because right after I testify, I plan to head back to LaGrange, Georgia.
I got a 4-hour ride.
Okay, well, I plan to spend time with my dogs. I would say I was going to spend time with my wife, too, but she's in Sedona at a wellness retreat. And then she's going to follow that with a trip to Palm Beach to rest. So I can't figure that out, but I think it's just to be away from me, which Chairman Ballinger agrees with. So anyway, we're passing out a sheet, and before I go to the track sheet, this is going to tell you a little bit about where we are and what we're trying to do. We're obviously focusing on competitive pay, and I think y'all have probably heard that from a lot of people, but I want you to see the numbers that we're dealing with. So if you look at the first sheet, it's the District Attorney's Program. You know, currently there are over 11 million people in the state of Georgia. We have 429 state-paid prosecutors to cover 159 counties, 50 judicial circuits. The remainder of the prosecutors are funded by county positions, but the state funds 429. The state also funds 200 state-paid prosecution support staff. That is 1 investigator per circuit, 2 secretaries per circuit, a victim advocate, and that's your 200. And they're also the 50 elected DAs. They process every felony case that occurs in those counties. They're also responsible, the DAs are also responsible for child abuse protocol, child fatality review, providing victim services, and also advising law enforcement. That's just touching a little bit on their duties. Obviously, a DA of 50 DAs need a support staff. They need the ADAs, they need the prosecutors to help them. So if you look at the next sheet, state-paid ADA vacancies, you will see what we're currently trying to manage. 429 state-paid positions. We right now have, as of January 2024, 42 ADA vacancies. You will note that some of these vacancies are significant. Western Judicial Circuit, Cordele Judicial Circuit, 43% vacancy rate. Northern Judicial Circuit, 43% vacancy rate. Blue Ridge, Brunswick, just if you go down that first list, go all the way down to Lookout Mountain, you'll see 25% or greater when you go back up vacancy rate. I've heard about we needing more judges, and I don't disagree with that. I know about the courtroom backlog. I was an elected DA for 25 years. We've had backlogs since we've been around. You can put as many judges as you want on the state payroll. You can hire them, you can put them there. But if there's not a prosecutor and a public defender or a defense lawyer on the other side, those judges will simply go into a courtroom and sit and wait for a case to be brought to them. Because the DA, that once a warrant is taken, it is the DA that has to get the investigative file, the DA that has to review that file, the DA that has to decide, is that case even prosecutable? Oh, and I'm sorry, I should have introduced Herb Cranford as the DA for the Coweta Judicial Circuit. He's also the budget chair for the Prosecuting Attorneys Council and the DA's Association. Chris Jones is my chief financial officer, and I'm Pete Skandalakis, if y'all didn't know. But anyway, somebody has to touch that case, and we are in a labor-intensive judicial system. You can't plug these numbers into a computer. You can't rely on some magic program to get this done. An ADA has to review that case, see if it's prosecutable, be available to the defense bar to negotiate a bond so somebody can get out on a bond, to negotiate a plea, to dismiss a case. If a case needs to go to trial, to go to trial. So without ADAs in the courtroom,
we're in trouble without public defenders. And I will tell you, when you look at these numbers, you can see there are some circuits that are in dire straits. They are not able to keep up with the caseload. And once we had the COVID shutdown, that caseload has just increased. And if you can't provide those services to look at the caseloads, you're also creating a situation in which victims aren't served and defendants aren't served. And that's part of the problem in the criminal justice system. As you see, our ADA turnover rate is 24%. Those are ADAs that maybe they go to a higher paying office, or maybe they just leave the profession. One thing that we're having trouble with now is the fewer ADAs in the courtroom, the fewer ADAs in the offices, creates more cases for the ADAs that stay. Those ADAs will get burnt out rather quickly. If we cannot provide them assistance, they're going to leave because it is just a cascading situation. Low pay, that's one factor. Heavy caseload, that's another factor. Not having a weekend where you can go home and visit with your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or anybody, your family, that's a big problem. Handling hundreds of cases per assistant DA, hundreds of cases per public defender is a problem. Our current starting pay, if you look at that, current ADA pay, our current starting pay is $58,250. Now, some circuits can supplement ADA pay, and they do that rather well. Some do it rather well. There are a number of circuits in our state where the DA does not get sufficient funds from the counties to supplement his or her ADAs. So that's the starting pay. That's after 4 years of college, 3 years of law school, coming out, and if you're trying to start a family, you best wait, because you're not going to get very far on $58,000 and having to pay student loans. With 10 years experience, and that's what we need, 10 years of experience to really learn what you're doing on major cases and to be able to handle the volume, you're only making $88,734. With our increase, and I think this is an important slide for y'all to look at, what is a competitive pay? Is making over $100,000 after 10 years, is that unreasonable? Is it unreasonable to pay an attorney with 10 years experience or more, $110,218? That's what we're asking for. If you look at the pay scale by experience, you will note that our attorneys that are at the top of the pay scale, $119,000, they are maxed out. So anytime, without adjusting our pay scale, we cannot give them raises unless we raise our pay scale by 3 steps. That's another thing we're asking you to look at and to approve. Not only do we want to starting salaries a little bit higher, we don't want to get into salary compression where you're bringing somebody brand new in and they're making almost the same amount of money that somebody has been there 5, 6, 7 years. So we want to move our pay scale up so we can keep our experienced attorneys in our offices. An experienced attorney can do 3 times, 4 times, 5 times the volume of work than somebody coming right out of law school. And not only can they do that, can they manage that type of work, they can manage other attorneys, they can mentor other attorneys, they can also deal with problems that they have the experience that is necessary to be a good prosecutor. They've also seen things. There's nothing like an experienced attorney who knows the value of a case. Young lawyers come in and they think everything. They're just full of vinegar. I won't use the first term. They're just full of vinegar. They want to try every case, and you look at them and you say, that case is a loser. If you try that case, that not only is that jury going to find him not guilty, they're then going to come and ask why we can't get your salary refunded to the county or to the state. And so an experienced lawyer can take a young lawyer aside and say, you are not trying that case, you're dismissing that case, or you're pleading that case, or you're sending that case to an alternative court. Any one of those things. If you look at our assistant DAs by position and salary, you will note that Assistant District Attorney 3 and Assistant District Attorney 4, that they account for a majority of our people in our office. Together, that's 74%. Those are the people we're trying to retain. Those are the people we want to keep because they can do more. And those are the people who should be rewarded for committing their lives to the state, committing their careers to the state, and working hard to represent the people of Georgia. Now we get to our fiscal year appropriation request. And Mr. Chairman, I know you said stay away from the governor's ads, but I want to address one ad that we have that will be in the governor's ads beside the 4% cost of living. That is the $3,000 salary enhancement for post-certified law enforcement officers. Like I told you, every DA gets at least one state-paid investigator. By law, they have to be post-certified. There are a number of DA's offices that the county provides the additional investigators. These investigators do have arrest powers, particularly when they're sworn in by the sheriffs. There's some counties, some circuits like Gwinnett, that by local legislation, they have arrest powers, and they're sworn in. They serve subpoenas. They go out and they look for witnesses, sometimes not in the best of neighborhoods. They provide security to our offices and our courtrooms. There are many times when I've had an investigator, because I knew I was dealing with someone who was a little bit hostile to the state or hostile just to the criminal justice system, that your investigator will be the one providing the security. We think they qualify. Excuse me. I'm going to steal this water right here. We think they qualify, and we ask you to look favorably upon that $3,000 increase for them.
They've not gotten it previously?
No, sir. And I don't know if that was an oversight on our part or where it was, but we would like them to be considered.
We missed a couple because their employee ID numbers didn't coincide with law enforcement, so.
And I'll also say that many of our investigators, or some of the investigators at times, if a local jurisdiction needs some help on a search warrant or something, they'll also be involved in those. So that's what we're looking at. When you look at the district attorneys, and I'm referring to the track sheet on page 4 of 25, 8.3, competitive pay. You look at that increase that we're asking for is $15,215,681. When you look at that, and I provided you a slide on this, the appropriation request, $14 million of that will be to the assistant DAs. Then there's another $792,000 that will go to the support staff, which are the investigators, the victim advocates, and the investigators, and the legal assistants. So that'll go to them. That's all a one-step increase for them on that pay scale. If you look at the next slide, or the next assistant DA competitive pay request, you'll note that while we are asking for $15 million, 14 million for the ADAs, a little bit over 14 million. 69.6% is in state benefits. So the salary adjustment we're asking is about 8.5 million. That's all in your spreadsheet under 8.31. And do you want me to go on? Do you have any question about the DA program? And Mr. Cranford's here too that could answer any questions.
I'm not sure what this question's about, but Judge Gunter has a question.
Okay.
Pete, I was looking at the state paid ADA vacancy sheet you have.
Yes, sir.
All right. And Western Circuit is authorized to have 8 ADAs, and they're down 5. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
How many judges they have in that circuit they're attending to? I know at least 3.
I think they have 4 now.
According to the formula, if they've got 8 state paid, they should have 4.
I think they have 4.
4, and that doesn't include the juvenile court they probably have to attend as well. Is that correct?
Right. And the state provides us 1 juvenile prosecutor. This is by formula, 1 juvenile prosecutor per circuit. So if you're a 1-county circuit, you get 1 juvenile prosecutor. If you were a multi-county circuit, judge like you and I were,
Yeah.
you get 1 juvenile prosecutor. Now, in my circuit, we got 1 juvenile prosecutor, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4 juvenile court judges. So we have to we elected by law, we were allowed to do this, not to be in 2 of the juvenile courts, where the county is paying a special prosecutor to be in those courts, because we simply couldn't cover it. There were things that when I was DA, I couldn't cover. Now, my successor here is a lot smarter than I am, and he may be doing better, but do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think it's worth making the same point regarding, we get 1 ADA. If you have 1 accountability court, you get 1 state-funded ADA for that. Well, in my circuit, it's 5 counties. We've got 2 or 3 drug courts, 2 mental health courts, a veterans court. So the state formula is helpful because it's giving us state-paid ADAs, but it doesn't necessarily really match up with the work required in that particular circuit.
So even though you get 1 state-paid ADA for accountability courts, the fact of the matter is he has to have every accountability court manned. Those meetings that they have, the pre-meetings, who gets in accountability court, who doesn't, what should be a penalty if somebody doesn't do well. DA Cranford has to have somebody there. And, again, you're still managing a very heavy caseload. DA Cranford's caseload, like I said, 4th largest in the state.
I think something else that may illustrate the situation we're in, a lot of DAs are really struggling that I talk to. They're worried their office may collapse, particularly in the rural areas. And I think the request we're making, disproportionately helps the rural DAs. But we added an 8th judge to our circuit last session, which by formula gives me 1 additional state-paid ADA. Rather than try to hire an additional assistant DA, I essentially cannibalized a position, and moved a county-funded position into that state position, so I could use the county funds that was going to that ADA to give some raises, just to try to keep people. So I've moved people into our state-paid positions, but I've still got 2 unfilled county positions. And so, y'all are understandably looking at state-funded positions because that's what y'all fund. None of this addresses, open county positions. So I think it's actually worse out there, particularly outside metro areas, than you're even seeing here.
Any other questions on the DA program? Okay, I will go now to our next program is.
Let me ask you one thing.
Yes, sir.
I believe there's a differential now between the salaries for public defenders and assistant DAs. Is that the case, or is that just a misunderstanding on my part?
I think, and Ms. Ali's here, so she can talk about this. We are starting under our salary scale. We are starting our ADAs at $58,000. I don't know what Ms. Ali's starting her people at. I think that's a question she can answer better.
Sure. I just remember I used to work with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council back in the 90s, and I was astonished when we were hiring ADAs, federally funded, to do drug courts for $35,000 a year.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how they start a family and pay back if they have student loans. I just couldn't understand how they could do that.
We did a brief search. We were looking at one of the rural circuits, and we were looking at a pay of an ADA at $58,000, and we were just looking at an average home, maybe 1,400 square feet or something like that. It was $250,000. Plus student loan, you're not going to be able to buy a home, and And if we could even get those ADAs down to South Georgia and North Georgia, just to be there 2 or 3 years and get the training. If they want to be trial lawyers, the best place to be a trial lawyer is in a DA's office or a public defender's office, because they are constantly trying cases. DeKalb County tried 78 cases last year. 78 in 1 year. That's almost unheard of. Mr. Cranford, do you know how many cases y'all tried last year?
Last 2 years, 55 and 46.
That's
Those were both records.
and that's just constantly going. In once you get a case ready for a grand jury, that's easy. Getting a case ready for a trial, lining up your witnesses, the availability of your witnesses, when can you get your crime lab witnesses there? That becomes much more difficult, much more time consuming. So ADAs that are preparing for trial, they're not sitting back in their office also preparing cases to be filed with a grand jury. They simply just don't have the resources to do that, and that's a problem. If you look at your next slides, the FY appropriation request for the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, one of the things we're asking for is transferring Prosecuting Attorneys Qualification Commission to a new program. Right now, the PAQC that both the House and the Senate have voted on, and that won't be an additional cost. I think last year the House and Senate approved 1.1 million. Now, that money has been reduced because the Prosecuting Attorneys Qualification Commission has not been able to do any cases simply because the rules haven't been approved. This year, y'all have passed laws, you have passed a statute trying to fix that. But the reason we want it to be under a new program is because if it still comes under the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, there's not a separation of division. It's almost because the council controls the state budget. And I don't think it's the intent of the state legislature to have the PAC council, which is comprised of 6 elected DAs, 3 elected solicitor generals, to control the budget of a organization or an agency that the Senate and the House want to look at if a DA needs to be disciplined. So we'd kindly ask that you move that into a separate program.
Could you repeat that one time?
Yeah. You have what is now called the Prosecuting Attorneys Prosecuting Attorneys Qualification Commission.
Right.
It is designed to investigate cases in which a grievance has been filed against a DA.
Right.
Last year, that money was put in the PAC, the Prosecuting Attorneys Council budget. It was line itemed as PAQC, but it was put under our budget. Under our rules, our council would be responsible to approve expenses of the PAQC. But if you put it in a separate program, we can contract. It can still come under our umbrella, but we can contract with the PAQC, Mr. Cranford's a member of, to provide services, but we can't go into their budget and deny unless they're spending it recklessly. We can't do anything to stop their expenditures. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does to me. So I'm sure everybody else can grasp it if I can.
So we have the governor's add-ons. One of the things, again, is I do have working for me 3 post-certified investigators who are all over the state of Georgia. They do the same thing any post-certified investigator does. I'd ask that they be included in the $3,000. Let's see. Again, we're seeking competitive pay for our prosecutors there and our 34 prosecution support people. You can see that increase in line item 8.4.1. I think that covers that. We're also asking for an increase in office rent. I've included some pictures there. We're in an obsolete building. Our elevators sometimes work, sometimes they don't. I've had staff members caught in our elevators. I've had people who come to our trainings. We can provide training for up to 100 people. The elevators have just stopped working at times. So we have mold remediation going on there. It's been a constant problem with heating and air issues, roof leaks, and our vehicles have been broken into. So one of the things you don't want to see is a prosecuting attorney's council having their state vehicles broken into and vandalized. We also had one vehicle we were about to turn back into surplus. It was a fortunate thing that we were going to turn it into surplus because somebody stole our catalytic converter. That happens. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, but you can see that we're in a little bit of trouble there. And then I have the conflict case program. Our conflict case program has been, that y'all funded last year, it's been very successful. And we have taken on, since its inception, we have taken on 162 cases. Most of those have been in Chattahoochee Circuit, where that DA had to conflict off or recuse himself on about 365 cases, but we're assuming about 18% of that caseload. I do have an investigator there. I would ask that he also be part of that $3,000 post-certified. That concludes my presentation. We are here to answer any questions that y'all have.
Well, I got off on a tangent there, but when you started talking about Prosecuting Attorneys Qualification Commission, I thought we were going somewhere else. And
no,
and
we want to keep the program separate.
Right.
Simply because we think it's a conflict of interest for, if you're investigating DAs, for DAs on the council and the Solicitor Generals to have veto power over the PAQC.
And I'll understand if you don't want to answer this, but what's your group's take on where we stand now with that system?
Well, they have not heard any cases because the rules they sent up to the
Right.
Supreme Court felt they did not have the authority to review those rules. So I think they're waiting for.
It's being reworked right now.
Yes, sir.
It's
And Mr. Cranford's on on the commission, so maybe he can answer it.
You don't have to. I know it's a touchy area.
What was your question?
I just wanted an update on, and perhaps, from somebody on the inside, what the take is on that commission.
Yeah, I think there's a bill working its way through the
There
legislature
is.
that would allow the commission to essentially approve its own rules rather than the Supreme Court do it, and which would take care of that specific issue. And I believe there are a couple other things being discussed that might help, such as putting subpoena power in the statute. So I think, it's working through, and if it passes, I think we'll be able to get going.
I was just kind of surprised at some of the discussion about that when we've had the Judicial Qualifications Commission forever, and well, for a pretty good while now, and I always thought that was a great thing, and it was handled very well, and it just didn't seem like, and of course, there's always some people, but some of the DAs were really thought that it was a prejudicial issue, and I don't think it's prejudicial. You either do your job or you don't, and I know there's got to be a lot of leeway with DAs because they have to make some pretty tough decisions from time to time. But one of them in my district just gave 2 people probation for murder, and it just seemed like because they didn't get a timely trial, and my supposition is that the DA had some responsibility in them not getting a timely trial, and there's a lot of hue and cry in our area about that.
I think I would like to say, I think I understand the Supreme Court's ruling and coming down the way they did. DAs are in the judicial branch, but the question is, do we exercise a judicial power or an executive power? And they basically said, they're not going to decide that issue kind of administratively without a case in front of them, you know. And so I understand why they did what they did, and it's an easy enough fix to change the statute. And I think my view of this legislation is it does preserve as kind of sacrosanct a DA's individual case discretion. You can do whatever you think is right on an individual case. As you said, that's a very important thing, and I think it preserves that.
And Mr. Chairman, to answer your question as well, the DAs are divided on it. I mean, and just like anything else, they're divided.
And I've seen that. That's
Okay.
why I asked the question. I didn't, probably inappropriately.
Yeah, could I, going back to the DA budget, I don't know that we had addressed, and I think this is just worth saying again, what we're proposing our starting salary would go from roughly 58,000 to 71,000. I don't know if we mentioned that, and at least in my office and other DAs I talk to, I think that would make a big difference in being able to recruit people out of law school. At 10 years, you would make over 100,000, and that's something, in talking to law students, I think I can sell. If you stay with me 10 years, I can make you a good trial attorney, and you'll be making 6 figures. I think that's really compelling. And if we want to add a few steps to the top of the scale, that would take us from, 119 to 128? Yeah, so you know, the people that do commit to public service and prosecution, at the end of that, you know, they'd be up to 128. I think those are the kind of 71, over 100,000, and 128. That's going to make a really big difference, in my opinion.
Well, you have to have some kind of an anchor to keep people, and if you're going to have professional prosecutors, you need a career ladder and steps, and I don't know how we can do otherwise.
Mr. Chairman, I think you hit the nail on the head. A career ladder where you know what you're going to get, for how many years you stay, and it'd be nice if we had what's the name of that pension again?
Defined benefit.
A defined benefit pension. I mean, that would help people stay in public service. And I know that, I can't remember who was talking about it earlier, states have gone away from that, and I understand it, but it sure makes public service attractive.
And even if you keep them 10 years and you turn them into a great trial lawyer and then they leave, you're just starting right back over again.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you
for
so
all you
much.
do.
Thank you all.
Here's the one we're all looking for. Public defenders.
Mr. Chairman, Mike, hold on, Mike. Mr. Chairman, I forgot to talk about,
It's too late now.
I forgot to mention that there's a pass-through in our budget, and I don't know if y'all want to hear from Mr. Holloman, but if you look at Council of Superior Court Clerks 8.2, they're asking for a $5,500 increase for funds for operation to recoup some COVID funds. Mike, is that correct?
That's correct. And that doesn't even recover all of them.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
That's over the last 15 years from the recession, COVID, unfortunately, you have to get that back.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I hated you were last, but I don't make up the list, and somebody's got to be last. So.
Well, maybe I should say we save the best for the last, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chairman, and other members of this body. Thank you. I have supporting me here today Terry Rayford is our CFO, and Natalie Glazier is our Chief Legal Officer, and a whole lot more. And I hope y'all can bail me out if I get stuck. The statewide changes, I'm going to ask that you just, I'm not going to go through that, except for one area of that I am going to ask your indulgence. We're on page, that's it, thank you, Terry. We're on page 21 of 25. And the statewide changes, I don't have any reason to go through them other than to beg your indulgence of just sustaining that and approving that, except for 37.25. which is to provide additional 3,000 salary for selected post-certified law enforcement officers. We don't require our investigators to be post-certified, and as such, is only a few of them who are post-certified. We will ask that you repurpose that money so we can provide training that's relevant to our group, our investigators, so they can have a different kind of certification that's needed for us. We do not require post-certification. We are not law enforcement. We will leave that for the law enforcement officers to do that. But there's a different kind of certification that I think we need, which is very appropriate and relevant to public defenders. And I'm going to ask that we repurpose that money so that all our investigators could take advantage of that. And that will be the $512,899. Other than that, for the statewide, that's all I have for the statewide, but then I go to our specific request for public defenders. Just like any other person in the judicial system, and I thank Pete Skandalakis because I think he already talked a lot about this. We're asking for 9.1 to increase salaries for our public defenders. We have been behind until a few years ago, and I just have to thank you all for giving us the grace to get up to where we are right now. Vacancy rate is not as much as it used to be. We're doing a little bit better, but we still need more funds to attract and retain and train our public defenders. And when we train them, we don't want to train them for other agencies. Everyone tells us if you want to be a good lawyer, go to the public defender's office, district attorney's office. We want them to be good lawyers for us for a long time. I sometimes joke with them that, okay, you think the grass is greener on the other side, the water bills are high, but they don't come back. Because I'm thinking, oh, they're going to be right back, but they don't, which means that there are other entities out there that are attracting the training that we provide. I'm respectfully asking that you consider us very seriously so that we can continue to attract and retain good attorneys. I just want to kind of bring to your attention that in 2016, there was a study that was done, and it was a Commission for Public Defenders, Judicial, and Defender Salary in 2016. Even back then in 2016, it was recommended that our starting salaries be 104. And I did a little bit of math. I'm not really good with that, but I looked at the inflation rate. If we could factor inflation into it, we should be at 132 by now, but we're not asking for that because we know we have to take baby steps. So we're asking for 9.159 to increase our public defenders so that we can retain them. Our second request is am I correct? Huh? Okay, our second request is rent for conflict offices. We have about 14 offices that we have established statewide to take care of our conflict cases. And we do need rent for some of them. Over the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, we have moved from the building where we used to be to save money. But in addition to that, we have actually moved some of our alternate offices into our main office downtown. Our Covey office is down with us, DeKalb County and Fulton County alternate offices. We have consolidated those offices into one. But we cannot manage every place from downtown. Over the last 3 months, I have been traveling, and I am proud to let you know I have been to many, many places now, and I'm still traveling. Bainbridge, Portola, Cordele, Tifton, Albany, Hinesville, Americus, Cairo, and so much more that I have visited on my own, along with my staff, just to see what is going on. And there I know we need to get the services close to where citizens are. We have to have some places for them to stay. I wish we could move everybody downtown, but that's not practical and it's not reasonable. We cannot do everything from Atlanta. We have to be in the rural areas. And so for that, we're asking $258,888 in funding for rent. In alternate public defender regional offices, we're still missing a place to house our own employees. The conflict gang and RICO cases. How much we asking for that? Okay. We're asking for $937 for the conflict gang and RICO cases. We actually could be asking more than that, but we have been able to use funds that we have in-house, be it federal funds, ARPA funds, ARCA funds, to kind of reroute the spending on that. So we're asking for $987 on that, Chairman and members of this body. As you heard from the Department of Law, the prosecution for that is going up, and I believe it will continue to go for some time. We have the constitutional mandate to make sure that we represent every single person that's charged with a RICO crime, and we cannot do two clients for one attorney. We've been asked that question. State bar rules, ethical rules, we have to provide one per each person. And it will be much higher if we didn't do strategic initiatives in-house to create different units so that we can absorb as many as possible before we farm them out. And even then, we still need resources to manage that. So I ask respectfully that you consider providing us more resources so we can be there to represent the individuals who are going to be charged. And we heard from the prosecutor, we heard from the Department of Law. That's something that's going to happen, and we have the constitutional mandate to make sure that they were represented. We ask you respectfully to grant that.
How many public defenders do you have across the state?
For the state public defenders, I was just counting now, is 222 state. Yes.
I just see in these recent RICO cases, the last one I think got 52 defendants. That's kind of a
yes, sir.
Pretty significant job managing one for each of those defendants.
Yes.
One public defender.
Yes, sir.
I don't know how you do that.
It is, and it's very expensive because we can only take so many, and then we have to farm the rest out at a cost. And if the trials go for more than 4 weeks, now we increase what we're even paying to the tune of $55,000 a year, a calendar year. So these cases, they're expensive. We understand why the prosecution is charging. We get that, but we want to make sure that the charging is not mutually exclusive of providing for the constitutional rights and our statutory rights to defend these cases, sir.
I have another question here.
Yes, sir.
Chairwoman.
How many opt-out counties do you have in the public defender system?
6.
6.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
6 counties or 6 judicial circuits?
It's actual county.
Actual counties.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what percentage of that is the overall?
You mean the caseload?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't know. Once they opt out, we're not really, we don't have any control over their caseload.
Okay.
Yes,
All right. So you would have no idea how many of those defendants, we'll say there's 100 defendants in the state of Georgia, 6 of those counties are opt out. You don't know if that means 10 defendants or out of the 100 or 15 defendants out of the 100. You would have no idea.
What I tell you is those are the defendants that are in our 44 judicial circuits.
And those remaining 90, we'll just say figuratively, 94 counties. I mean, obviously, there's more than that
Yes,
in the state of Georgia. I recognize that. I'm just trying to use round numbers so that it's easy and everybody can kind of follow along.
Yeah.
So 6 counties, though, are taken out, and you have no idea.
6 count because they're not under the control of the state, so I wouldn't really know.
Okay.
But I'm sure if we ask them, if you want me to ask, and I can reach back out to you later on, I can provide that. But because we don't supervise them, we don't know.
Yeah, I just wanted that clarification, particularly for other members of the committee, because they are talking about, we do use this conflict case, but there are counties who have opted out of the system. So.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. And whatever we report to you is what we're responsible for.
And I heard you mention ARPA, and I wonder if you could explain to me how you utilize ARPA in your agency.
So once a case we define it as a case that's more than a year. Once a case is past that threshold for 1 year to 18 months, we will change the funding source from state funds to ARPA funds. But we're trying to target the cases that have been around for some time.
And there's no way you could use that funding for more cases?
Oh, it's quite a few of them. We just had a big meeting the other day with our finance department. We're going to target a lot of our cases because you can imagine most of our cases are reaching that threshold right now.
Okay. Judge Gunner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many conflict cases do y'all carry annually?
Today, 17,901 to date.
Okay. And did I get it right that you're asking for 9.8 million for the conflict counsel? Is that right?
No, for public defenders, for state public defenders for us to increase their salaries.
To increase salaries?
Yes, sir.
And you're going from 72,000 to what?
I would love to go to 93, and that sounds like a lot, but let me explain myself. We don't get any supplements at all. We are just, whatever you give us is what we have. And so we cannot compete with counties that are able to give supplements to their attorneys. State employees are state employees, 100%.
Thank you.
Okay, continue.
Yes, sir. So I would like to present a request for Atlanta Judicial Circuit to get $981,000. Some time ago, the chief public defender, the circuit public defender, was gracious to us when we were having issues. I was not in this position at that time, but I've been able to read to see what happened. At that point, we needed attorneys to start the conflicts office, and he was able to release some of his attorneys so that we could start that office. So you can see how long conflicts has been an issue. And we started the office with the help of the Atlanta Judicial Circuit. I believe it was Vernon Pace. He released some attorneys to us so that we could do that. Well, today the new CPD has a great need for those positions back. And I think it's only fair that we give them their positions back. They were gracious enough to loan us those positions to the state at that time so that we could get the conflicts office up. And so for that, we're asking, the total for that is 980. Let me just have this. I can't find mine. The total for that is 981,890. And Chairman, if I may just go on to Stone Mountain Judicial Circuit attorneys, when the agency started, they had a different kind of contract with them. And at that time, for whatever reason, the payment to them was less, much less than what it would be and what it should have been. And that contract has expired. And we need to go back to the statutory requirements and regulations in paying them. And for that, the difference is $409,871.56.
Judge Gunner's got another question.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to get a handle on the conflict counsel.
Yeah.
Did I understand you to say that you have in-house hired conflict counsel?
Yes, I'm going to talk about that now. I think the specialized units.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'd like to hear how you.
Yeah,
got
let me
that
talk
designed.
about that. That is a unit that's very close and dear to my heart because we use them to make sure that we have representation everywhere and anywhere we need representation. We're still reeling for the effects of COVID. We still have vacancies. We still have legal deserts. In the state of Georgia, we cannot find attorneys. So we have created different levels of attorneys in-house. We call some of them C2, monthly contractors, and the specialized unit. The specialized unit is probably what you want to know about more than anything because that's the unit that we house downtown here in our central office, but we assign them to anywhere in the state of Georgia where there's a need. And that's the one UC specialized unit. We're asking to expand it, and we keep everybody downtown. We are centralized, but when there's a need, be it conflict, be it a case that doesn't have an attorney, it doesn't matter what it is, we'll take one of those attorneys that we call traveling attorneys, and we send them to where the need is. We do not put them in different parts of the state because we don't know how many cases are going to be available, but we know how many cases are available statewide, and it's always best for us to send our attorneys to those areas. I don't think I answered your question.
Well, we're getting there.
Okay.
All right, so the money you're asking for is to pay a salary to these people?
Is to expand the specialized unit, to hire more traveling lawyers.
Okay, I'm taking it that this has passed a constitutional challenge? That you got attorneys working for the same agency
Yes, sir.
that you're using as conflict counsel?
Okay, so when I looked at you, I knew I didn't answer your question. So for the conflicts, what we've done is that we've created different units so that they're like different law firms and don't report to the same supervisors. And the reason why we do that is that, for an example, let's say we get 6 cases. We have 4 different opportunities in-house to absorb those cases before we send them out. If we were to send 6 cases out, it would cost us a whole lot more. And that's why we've created, it's strategic, so that we can manage more cases and reduce the cost of doing that.
Okay.
Did
All
I
right.
answer this time?
Yeah, and I guess that's similar to what PAC does with their conflict.
Yes.
They only have like 3 attorneys there.
Yes, we have units. They have
How
3
many
attorneys.
do you have in a
So
unit?
we have, the second tier is the one that goes to the in-house attorneys. The third one will go to monthly contractors that we pay them monthly, but they're independent
So those
contractors.
are independent contractors?
They are independent contractors, but they take a certain number of cases from us. Those are independent contractors. And then we have the specialized unit. And so that makes about 3 different units that we can send our cases to before we send them out.
And are you paying them on a per-case basis or just as a retainer?
Or the monthly contractors, we pay them a certain amount of salary for a sum for a year.
So that they're on a salary?
Now salary, go ahead.
They're like a retainer?
Like a, yes.
They would take up to 100 cases over the course of the year, but they don't necessarily have exactly that number, so they're not paid per case, but they would take up to 100. So you could do the math per case, because we are reaching that 100 on all the contracts.
Yeah.
So.
And y'all, I guess, cover their office space and all that?
No, they're independent contractors. They have an opportunity to do their business, carry on a private practice on the outside.
All right, so how many of your in-house people do you have that are conflict counsel?
So let me, okay. So that's the alternate office, the offices that I described when I was asking for rent. Those are the alternate offices that we have created, and we have about 14 of them now. So they can take cases, conflict cases that are coming from that area, the neighborhood where they're established. For an example, Fulton County has 1 alternate office. DeKalb County has 1. Those are single counties. Most places are now single counties. They will be responsible for 3 or 4 counties at the same time. And they take the conflict cases that are coming from there, and they are employees of ours.
Okay, but you have them housed here in Atlanta, is that right?
We have them housed in our own buildings. And the rent that I just asked for is for a couple of those offices in the rural area, so we can find them buildings.
Okay. Thank you.
Did I answer your question? No.
So each of the alternate offices, they have 1 managing attorney, 3 attorneys, 1 investigator, and one or 2 admins. So each of those offices, that's the setup, similar to the circuit office.
I think I have to explain it better. Let's assume we have 4 cases. The first tier will go to the CPDs, the Circuit Public Defenders. The next 3 will come to us. And those levels that I just described to you, the second one will go to our in-house alternate office. And they are employees. The third one will go to a monthly contractor that I just described to you. The fourth one, if possible, will go to the specialized unit that we're trying to expand so they can go to the rural areas to take more cases. And if it's more than 4, then we're looking for independent contractors that we will pay on a per diem basis, and we pay $7,500 per case for felonies. And that's just a big increase for what it used to be. A year ago, 2 years ago, it was at 3,500. We have doubled it. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that I explain it well. And if I haven't, I will come to you after this is over so I can maybe draw it, because I just want to make sure that you understand what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Okay.
That's about it. We're asking. Please ask questions. I just want to
We
make
have
sure
any
that.
further questions? Anybody? We don't have any questions, so thank you for explaining everything in detail.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sure. We do have one more person that would like to speak from the ACCG. For a topic we're all familiar with.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you have a long drive back, so I'll try to be brief. Thank you, fellow committee members, for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Gabriel Carter, representing ACCG. We represent all 159 counties across Georgia. So I just first want to start off by thank you all for that per diem increase in the amended fiscal year 2024 budget for state prisoners housed in county correctional institutions. So we just want to thank you all for that. We truly appreciate that being in you all's budget. And we're also requesting that that same rate increase go into the fiscal year 2025 budget as well. But I'm just going to speak before you briefly today to also just share the importance of this same issue just happening in our county jails as well. So I think you all definitely understand the need in our county correctional institutions, which house workers for a much longer time than our county jails do. But our county jails also house state prisoners who are waiting to be sentenced to the Georgia Department of Corrections. So right now, counties do not get reimbursed for housing those state prisoners until after day 15. But I provided a sheet for you all with some data to show you all that, one, the average time that a state prisoner stays in our county jails is about 30 days once you kind of average that out. So about 15 days past, that we will be getting that per diem. So that's kind of one thing we want to point out to you all. And also, right now we're receiving $30 a day to house those state prisoners. But as we did some research, we found out that it costs about $59 a day, almost $60 a day to actually house that state prisoner. So we're just asking that you all consider increasing this per diem rate as you all did for the county correctional institutions, also increasing that rate for state prisoners who are housed at our county jails as well. So I'll save for any questions, and thank you all for your consideration.
Any questions? We put that money in last year, and it was it went away.
Yeah.
And then we put it back this year. We hope it stays in this time. But
Me too. Thank you.
Several counties have spoken to me, and if we don't contribute more money to keeping to housing them, they're going to they've told me that they're going to hire employees and 1099 them, and then we turn around and we send those prisoners back to the state prison system, which costs us more money again. So it's a tough situation, but I understand, because I got one in my county, and like the chairman of the county commission and the county manager bump into me in the grocery store pretty regular, and that's always something that they bring to my attention. So.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you. And my contact information is on the one pager that I have for you all. So if you all want to talk further, or if you all want to know any data for your specific counties, I'm happy to try to find that information out for you. So thank you.
I would like to get it from my county just to see it.
Okay, perfect. I'll work on that for you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order? We're adjourned. Thank you all.